Da 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 da! What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple minutes, get those notifications out, let people know I've gone live. In the meantime, if you've never met me before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. This week, we are in the midst here in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, in the midst of a heat wave. It's going to be above 30 Celsius all week long. And I'm kind of hoping, right? Anticipating, expecting that we're going to get a little bit of rain. June is our 1 month, our monsoon season. Not much of a monsoon season last year, at the very least. We got hardly any rain. We've gotten a little bit more this year. But, we're supposed to, right, have this little bit of balance in our what is it, weather, environment. There should be a balance, and you have to take a look, and you have to wonder that in this age that we live in right now, where we can pretty much control anything, right, we still cannot predict the weather, not even hour to hour, right? Not even hour to hour. We used to have a newscaster. He was just like the cutest guy. We all loved him. At 6 o'clock news roll around, we'd be there, and we'd wait for our weatherman to come on. He'd always get it wrong, always. But he was so entertaining, and he was somebody who had a really, really good heart, that it didn't really make a difference. We tuned in to the Weather Channel because of him, and it had nothing really to do about him, because again, it's something that mankind just does not have a handle on. Not to say that they never will. From what I hear, right, in the Middle East, these billionaires, trillionaires, they are seeding the clouds, and they are making oases in the desert. And I think that's pretty amazing. But long term, does that make sense? Um, right? In the moment for a little bit of enjoyment, but when you have that kind of nature, that beauty, you're enticing people to make that and call that home, right? And what if, right, the people who are paying to have the cloud seeded decide to pick up and move away? How long would it take for the desert to, right, reclaim the oases that, right, mankind has kind of dictated to be? But it's something to think about, because there isn't too much that these brains can dream up, invent, right? Innovate and create, because we are getting pretty smart. We're going to need bigger craniums to be able to hold our big brains soon, right? I'm not speaking for myself, but I'll include myself in that conversation for sure. Hello, Eugene. I'm doing great tonight. Oh, thank you for the sticker there. I've never seen that one before. I like it. You always answer the question before I ask, Eugene. It's so hot here. I don't know how the weather is like where you come from, but here in Winnipeg, super hot. I was saying yesterday I didn't even leave my house. I didn't even leave my apartment yesterday. And just before I was coming in live, I was setting the date for my podcast, and I went, "Oh my goodness, it's July 2nd already." And I went, "Yesterday was Canada Day." Right? Came across my path, wishing sisters or friends um, um, Happy Canada Day. And also in my thoughts for, what I would like to see this country look like, in the next decades or centuries going forward. And also in saying that, I was kind of looking at the future quite a bit today, how things would look. And, you can't really speculate because, again, we are moving so fast. We are such brainiacs that by the time you discover and invent one thing, right, you're doing that same thing, but you're doing it 10 times better, like even like the next day. They say that our intelligence now is doubling up, right? Every couple of years. And I think that's pretty crazy, right? It's but we've never gone through anything like that before. So we are feeling our way in that. We have to wonder, you know, how is that affecting us? How's that going to affect our children? How's it going to affect jobs? Are they going to have to dream up like a global wage for everybody because working will be something obsolete, right? And how will we motivate, inspire us to keep wanting to move forward without the busy of those a big part of our lives, right? I was not a big fan of full time. Whenever I could go part time, I would try to manage that. Uh, Only because this is my life, you know, and that freedom that comes with my life. In my choices, I can choose to work full time, do 40, 60, 80 hours a week. Or, like I said, because of my value for my actual life, I'm getting one shot at this, right? I'll take part time. Thank you very why I moved along. There were many reasons, but one of the reasons why I left my last job was just because I couldn't see myself coming out of the full time, right? There were illnesses going on, injuries going on, age going on, um, irresponsibility going on. And sometimes in that heavy load and not wanting to help, right? I never said no to the extra hours. And of course, right, I love money. So, of course, and I was working at saving for a car and stuff. So, right, I was gobbling up those extra hours, but it was beating me down and it was taking from my life and it was taking me away from the lessons. And I think, I did a pretty good job in staying the lessons. I had to kind of chop things up a little bit, do a little bit of an elimination in my life, even in my social life, even in the time that I spent with my family, right? Uh, that I seem to manage, and it's a good thing that I enjoy what I'm doing. I enjoy learning. It's something I never thought that I would be good at. And I didn't think it would be something that I would enjoy because my experiences in learning have always been, for the most part, traumatic experiences. And if you've never popped into one of my lives before, I come from a dynamic upbringing, a dynamic family. I've been to so many different schools in my life, sometimes twice a year. My dad was a nomad. He would buy houses and he would sell them for a profit. He wouldn't even fix them up. He'd put them up for the sale like the same week that right, our deal went through. And he would always just make a profit on that. My dad was a compulsive gambler. So, just having a regular job was not going to be good enough. He was also a commercial fisherman, and it did pay fairly well and in big chunks too, which seemed to be very good for our family because in those big chunks. He would take care of all the needs when he came home, and then whatever was left, he would play with it. But if the money was just kind of dribbling it in, he would gamble it as he went. This day and age, we're going to talk a little bit today about, innovation and a little bit about AI and how things are moving really fast. I was a VLT addict. It was that emotional attachment to my dad and being in need of a coping mechanism and understanding that, my dad loved gambling, right? And as a child, I didn't pay attention to, right? I thought we were poor folk, right? My mother worked in a hospital. She was making good money. My dad was a commercial fisherman, right? Big money in that. And he would drive cabs, and there was big money. You could almost make as much money driving cab as you did commercial fishermen, just in the tip money, and you didn't have to claim it. My dad didn't claim it. You're supposed to claim it, but my dad never claimed it, right? But there was always good money in in the jobs that they had, not necessarily coming into the house itself, right? Because as it came in, it was being spent and utilized. And I have to say, in this digital age, right, we had video lottery terminals. That was my what do you call that, poison, right? Because it was a poison. It destroyed my marriage. It turned me into a liar because I had to cover my tracks into where I was spending my money. And it made me take advantage of people who cared for me because I would borrow money to cover my debts. And then when I get that money, right, I said, oh, well, maybe I could make more money and really cover my debts and maybe put a little groceries in the. This is the way I was thinking. There is no winning in gambling, but that was my coping mechanism. So I said it. We were going to talk about innovation in the digital age, the uh, AI intelligence, and it wasn't something that my dad got to experience. Right, he got to experience the Nintendo. Right, that time the calculator was like this big and it had a cord plugged into the wall. So, in truth, my dad was not part of the digital age. I don't even think he made it to remote controls for the TV. I'm not quite sure. I can't remember. Possibly that he did, right? Things were moving so fast, and just got into that same coping mechanism as my dad in the gambling. But my dad had to. Dad was physical in it. He'd get in the car and he'd drive 24 hours down to Vegas or Reno. He would do the racetracks. He loved the racetracks. Friday night was poker night. My entire life, I knew Friday night was we weren't going to see Dad, right? Because it was poker night. But if there was the digital age, right, he would have been all over it. And I've never known my dad to be an angry, stressful person. And I look at my experience in gambling, and I was so stressed. I was so worried. I was so scared. I was so ashamed. So much shame. So much shame in gambling because you're taking the milk off the kids' cereal. I didn't have kids, right? I'm using that as an analogy, right? I spent the bill money, I spent the grocery money, and most people do. And the exact same downfall, because it was a downfall, because in the end, it made me negative. It made me, again, scared, nervous, sad, shame, all those horrible negative feelings that, I actually did go negative in that, right? in just covering my tracks, right? Keeping that air of that person that I wanted people to think that I was, when in all honesty, right, I really thought that I was one big loser at that time. And it should have been the most joyful, happy, loving time, full of fun, good jobs, money, right? Great relationships. And, you know, I'm not going to take the full blame in that, right? Because it does take two always, but I'm being honest and accountable by admitting and owning up to my fault, my part in my marriage falling apart, right? We were together for 8 years. They were the best 8 years of my entire life. I have to honestly say that. Maybe just the last year, right? But it was such a surprise to me because I didn't understand that there was any problems in the marriage. I knew I had problems. I didn't understand that my problems were really noticeable. I thought I was the queen of covering things up. And, my husband had his own issues. And I loved him anyway. I supported him anyway. I stood beside him anyway. I thought he was absolutely amazing and so perfect for me. And in a lot of ways, he was. But we all have handicaps. We all have things that we don't like about ourselves, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, right? And I can recognize that in myself at that time, right? I recognized it in others, but I didn't read too much into it then like I read into it now. It was only in my own safety that I would be paying attention, right? So I always lived my life in a way that would make it as safe for myself as I possibly could, understanding that, right, I lived in crazy town, right? So I just kind of accepted what I couldn't resolve. I accepted what I couldn't explain, what I couldn't stand up for, and what I couldn't understand to be a truth about myself. And that's a truth, but that's the thing, I wasn't woke up to any of those ideas, because if I was, I would have been working on those. I would have been working on those issues that were kind of wracking havoc in my marriage without my knowledge, because I was not paying attention. Today's a little bit of a different story. you know the this AI learning has grabbed a hold of me. I have never truly been somebody who was into video games. I've never been to like like drinking or doing needles. I would go for walks and have a joint. I would uh, gamble. I would eat. I would go to the store and get the pink ice donuts with the sprinkles. I would find my I would isolate, right? I would keep company with myself and keep company with my sisters, and my sisters were just as wired, right? But at least that pull was remaining within the within the family that way, right? This digital age and this AI learning, like I said, has grabbed a hold of me, and I love learning now. I think I'm a pretty amazing student, right? I could be a better typer, right? I could be more tidier in my notes. Oh, that's my grocery list. Right? I have to budget, and I'm just like, oh, I just like to go to the store and just grab what I want, grab what I need. And, in paying attention to my funds, I have to pay attention to my grocery list because I'm not just taking care of myself, I'm taking care of my cat. My cat costs me lots of money too. And I have goals and I have plans, and I'm putting money away for a trip in September. And I'm even second guessing in that because there are so many things that, right, I'm thinking I need, and I'm thinking, why am I treating myself to that and denying myself something else that is maybe just as important, right? But the thing is, I want to enjoy my life. And no matter what, even before I woke up to any of these ideas, I always say, before I woke up to any of these ideas, because it's hard to explain what I woke up to, right? But I was living that way already anyway, right? So when I'm coming in to my content now, I have to recognize that I am a good student. And I also have to recognize why I wasn't a good student when I was actually going to school. Like, and, you know, in some of these things, I get to teach myself, I get to reflect, I get to go back a little bit into my experiences and kind of pull things apart and put them back together to better understand in that. But now, right? We've got YouTube, we've got Google, we've got Wikipedia, right? We've got our phones where if we don't have that answer, that we could just text our friends. We don't even have to talk to them. We'll just text them and right, we can go back to what we were doing and sooner or later we'll get our answer back. But that's the thing. We're supposed to be interactive with each other. And I think this is going to be one of the problems with AI, with this digital age, into being physically active in our lives because we are getting hooked on these fixes, right? And like I said, in my experience, it was the pink ice donut, it was the VLTs, it was right. But in this day and age, these things grab you, and these guys, when I say these guys, I mean the content, the video games, the things that is so easy and accessible to us, that right, even being on Twitter, right? That's a that's an addiction. Just scrolling through. I'm using Twitter as an example, but it could be any platform, and just doing this all day, right? And that takes away from, well, that movement that we're supposed to be making, right? So you got to look into that. You got to kind of read into that. Why is this going on right now? Because it's catching, it's like a big net, and it's catching everybody, right? Even when I was coming out of high school and Nintendo just came out, dating myself there, right? Nintendo just came out, and I'm thinking, thank goodness I never ever got hooked on the video games. I can't imagine where my life would be right now if my attention was not where it is in the moment, right? Let alone being addicted to video games, or right, being you can gamble online. Can you imagine if I hadn't stopped gambling? Because right, I don't think, oh yes, they were gambling, they were gambling online, right? I was just thinking, the digital age started, right? Like I could have stayed in it, and during lockdown of COVID, I would have still been on it because I had been introduced to gambling online. But because I hadn't, when we got shut down with COVID, That was my grace. That was my gift. That was my opportunity to give it a real shot and get off those machines. I had been on the machines for 20 years, at least 20 years, and I was blowing, and it might not seem like a lot of money to some people, it could be just pocket change, but to me, it was a lot of money. 20, $30,000 a year. That's what I was that's what I was blowing on those machines. That it just to think about it. But the experience in that is the experience that I'm able to share, right? In that example to others, right? That possibly you'll second guess whether or not to put that quarter in a slot machine or that dollar into a slot machine, right? Because it did, it really did a job in my life. But it's a good story, right? There's lots of good lessons in that experience of being a compulsive gambler. My dad passed away before the digital age started running, and if he had, he would have been in there. He would have been stuck. He would have been so stuck. In the end, his illness, right, slowed him down a little bit. But like me, it was probably in his last year. Well, for me, it was my last year of gambling. For my father, it was probably his last year of his life, right? Because my father didn't get to live very long, right? And I can almost guarantee you it was all that stress, right? On top of the congenital heart failure, right? And he was able to double his life expectancy in the way that he cared for his mental and emotional well being. Like I said, when I came and started talking about it, like I've never known my dad to be angry. Well, that's not true. That's not true. It came to my mind, so I'll tell the story, right? My dad had four girls. My dad had four girls. We were all pretty close in age. And, in the 60s and 70s, it wasn't like today. We are on the pedophiles. We're looking at every man now as if there's some kind of pervert or something, right? But when I was growing up, my father and mother were very worried about their children being accosted by these pedophiles, and rightly so, because right, they were on us always, right? And because we were feral children, we pretty much had to take care of ourselves and know the lessons in that. And because my mother was assaulted, um, right before she got married, she made it a point that the moment we were even inkling of being able to understand, she was giving us the facts of life every 6 months. She was laying into us about men, right? The white vans, right? These talks that we should all be having with our children. My mother, she worked hard on that. She did a good job as feral children, right? We were off on our own. Like 7 years old, I'm on a bus by myself and I'm going down to Stanley Park to Second Beach and I'm swimming in the ocean. Right? I lived in Vancouver at the time. So it wasn't that we didn't have these issues. But I remember one time we lived in a complex, and I had a friend who lived in a house outside the complex, and I went to visit her. And right, her father, and I was just little, might be 5 or 6 years old. Right, and I told my father that this guy had touched me, right? And my father got every single man in that complex. There must have been 100 of them. There were a lot of them. My dad was in the front. They all had bats and clothes hangers and whatever they could get their hands on. I was young. I didn't quite on. I was terrified because I thought I had done something wrong, right? But I had told my father about it. I told my parents right away. I always told my parents everything at the time, right? And I don't think I said it in a way because I didn't understand. I maybe thought it was innocent or something. But he actually did one of those, like when they go to get Dracula with the torches and the picks and stuff. It was like that. Oh my goodness, right? And just now, I almost wanted to say that poor man, right? Because my dad, he had me by the scruff of his neck. I was in the front of all these men behind me, right? But I don't know why I'm telling. Oh, because it came to my mind. That's why, right? And also in the story about these conversations that my mother would have, and having four girls, right? And they were adult and they weren't naive as to, right, what the situation was, but my mother put the fear of God into us, and that is the truth. Put the absolute fear of God into us over that. Little bit different now, it's plastered in the Instagram shorts and TikToks and Twitters and, right, YouTube shorts, and we're actually having whole conversations for everybody, right? It's not just like that class you get in high school, right? I think it was like maybe the last year in elementary school, then again in high school where you get those sex talks, right? But now it's actually common conversation. But is it a good thing, right? Because, right, children are being introduced to adult ideas, and because I try really hard not to judge in that, I have to wonder because I'm worried about what we don't know, what we don't understand, just like that weatherman, right? Like, right? We don't have quite a handle on it right now. We don't know what it's going to create, right? You can see already the kids are belligerent and they are demanding in having those material things taken care of by their parents. They're online constant socially. How are we going to introduce them to their wives and their husbands because they're online so much that how do you get physical in that, right? And I'm not saying just to go off and have sex and stuff like that, but I'm saying physical, and as in having conversations, real conversations in that physical state, because it is in that physical interaction that we could actually feel that pull in our emotions, where we actually have that opportunity to care for somebody or to fall in love. And socially, I think we're going to be a little bit handicapped because of um, AI learning, right? Because we are isolating in that. It's just not the highly sensitives and the empaths now that are isolating. That's always been a trait of ours, right? Going back, right? Hundreds, thousands of years. It's always the way it's been. But so-called healthy, well balanced people are getting sucked in to these compulsions where we can't get away, where we're just scrolling or we're just playing video games and we're missing out on opportunities to move, right? There's a lot, right? Come to my mind again, like there's a lot of unintentional childlessness going on, right? And the children that are being born, they're being born with siblings that only have one parent in commonality, right? That, and sometimes they don't have two parents at all. They just have one. They don't even have a step parent. Or they have numerous step parents. Or every boyfriend that comes in becomes uncle. And, that can be very confusing. And, it takes away, I believe, the masculinity that, that male bonding is able to deliver, right? From adult to child. There's lots of things going on, right? Lots of things that we have to really, really pay attention. Even for myself, I'm online all the time, right? And I'm balanced in the content that I'm in online to a certain degree, right? Because I love learning, and that's probably a good thing, is that I am enjoying what I'm doing. But I'm also mixing it up with my passions and my hobbies, right? The bottle digging and the metal detecting and the American Idol. Right? But in this age, it's going to cause us problems that we're not aware of in this moment, and we're the first ones, right, to step in. And I'm saying, right, it's not the norm for people my age to be online as much as I am, but let's say the generation underneath me, like, right, this, it's important for us to be able to evolve, to be able to not become extinct. And I think that's probably one of my biggest worries, and I think it's probably one of the things that I'm trying to resolve, right? To resolve in that. This age of AI learning is offering up huge opportunities, life saving opportunities. And I have to say, that's the truth. They are making so many discoveries because of AI learning, because of the cross referencing that they're able to do now, how instant everything can be analyzed and presented to us in nice, tidy ways, that it's going to take away from our resilience. It's going to take away for our ability to do for ourselves, right? I believe these are some things that are going to be problems for us. But if we're talking about it and we're noticing it, can't we get together and put our minds together and really pay attention to the ones who are in it deep right now and look for possibly solutions so that we can be more balanced in how much time we spend, right, on our phones, online, playing video games, that there can have an opportunity and a little bit of space and time to kind of work on ourselves, right? To really work on ourselves. So I think about it for my own sake. I have to say, I wouldn't be here right now. I think I would be in a very dire strait in my life, and I might possibly have made different choices that would have had me in a situation where I would have been one of those women who had, right, a few children with numerous dads. And because, sometimes we don't always rub each other well. And if we do rub each other well, more often than not in this day and age, because it's acceptable, right, that we find ourselves changing our partners, falling out of love, right? Love is something that should be nurtured, right? Something that's always supposed to be growing and bearing fruit. And yet, right, we are not taking care of what's important, right? In my idea, in the way that I'm moving with my content and moving with my brand, right? I'm all about, it's funny to say, right? Because I come from a dynamic family, but I still say family is the most important thing, right? And sometimes we get dropped into difficult families, but in those difficulties, the very least we'll build some resilience. We will adapt and conquer, right? We will do what we have to do in order to get through it. Because as much as, right, we can get ourselves in that mix, we are naturally optimistic, right? It is in our nature just to be that way. And even if we're not feeling good here or feeling good here, it comes natural to us, right? And it'll still find its way, find its way out. And that's a truth. Okay, I'm jibber jabbering tonight. I've gone all over the place. I have to come in and take this lesson for myself. So and I'm getting tired now. So I'm going to call it a night. Eugene, thank you so much for popping into my life. I really appreciate you popping in as usual. And I'm always happy that I recognize that you've popped in, because lots of times I don't recognize until I've hit that end button on my lives, because I've gotten in such a flow that way. But today it was kind of in and out. But that's the thing about me that you'll get used to. You will find that formality in my content. Not often. There'll be times when it's necessary and I'll bring it to the table when it's needed. But it is in that genuineness, and it is in that understanding that, there are all parts of me. And I want to be able to connect with as many uniquely curious people as I can. I'll just leave it. I'll just leave it at that 100%. It's in that optimism quite often that we find those outs, right? In those difficulties that we have. And that's the truth too. Just going to bumble along in my week at the very least, understanding that change is always happening and it could be a totally different story next week, right? Okay, you guys. I don't think I touched on what I really wanted to touch on today. I actually had a topic that I was leading into in this AI intelligence. And if it comes to me in this moment, I will carry on. And if it doesn't, I'm going to call it a night. Have a great night, everybody. And we'll see you.